Tony Long, thank you so much to agreeing for an interview for my book, A Restored Earth. I wanted to begin by asking you about the Pew Charitable Trust and about how you came to be here working on illegal fishing.
So the Pew Charitable Trust have long had a marine environment program for some time, and I met some of the people from Pew talking about what was known then as the Global Ocean Commission, that was looking at the problems of protecting the oceans globally and what the leaders of the world could do. And it turns out there was a role to play on ending illegal fishing. The key there being that my background in the Navy, Royal Navy, as a surveillance officer, basically, as an expert in sort of happening out on seas beyond the beaches that people normally see, helped me to apply my skills to this role and help fight illegal fishing, which is causing a problem globally.
Thank you, Tony. Could you describe what you are doing, what Pew is doing to address illegal fishing around the world? And could you describe perhaps the scale of the challenge before us?
Yeah, well, the challenge that attracted me to the role. So, to be brutally honest, I didn't quite understand how big a problem illegal fishing was before I was presented this opportunity to Pew. If you think that upwards of $23.5 billion US a year goes into illegal fishing, that's the sort of equivalent of 23 million tons of fish. That's quite a big problem to solve. It's bigger than piracy was in the Gulf of Aden and the Indian Ocean. It's significant, and it just surprised me that people weren't trying to deal with it. In fact, there are a lot of people trying to deal with it, but it's being dealt with in little pockets. Pew's concept is to try and build a global system of enforcement that has all the relevant parts in a way that we can apply that over a sort of 10-year period to try and really bear down on things. So it's both the adjustment of policy and implementation of policy around the world, but also using things like market levers so that people are making the right choices about where they get their fish from, as well as demonstrating the best and most appropriate use of technology in order to understand where the illegal fishing is happening. Does that make sense?
It does, thank you, Tony. And are there particular areas of the high seas, of the ocean, that are particularly affected by illegal fishing, or is it globally manifesting itself as a threat?
Yeah, well, it's always difficult to sort of pick locations because, we often talk about Africa as being a hotspot. Sub-Saharan Africa is a hotspot for illegal fishing because many of the African nations don't have the resources they need to protect their economic zones. And many of the vessels that fish those waters are coming from the other side of the globe, what we call distant water fleets. So it's very difficult for people to understand where the vessels are and what they're doing. It is a global problem. You can say hotspots, wherever there's fish, and valuable fish, then it's likely to be a hotspot for illegal fishing. No one's actually saying, "Hey, I'm fishing illegally here. Please measure this." But they're going to chase the expensive, the high-value fish around the world, such as tuna. It's always going to draw attention and bad practice that is extremely difficult to chase down.
Thank you. And I think last year in 2016, quite an important legal development was achieved. A piece of legislation which would commit vessels to effectively declaring in a more transparent fashion their catch as they come to the shore. Is that right? And could you describe that, the Port State Marine?
Are you referring to the Port State Majors Agreement?
Yes, exactly. Yes.
Yeah. Well, so it's one of the key elements. So this is an international agreement that targets directly illegal fishing.
Yeah.
So it's designed to give a port state, any state that's allowing fish to be landed, the ability to look at the vessel that's arriving, consider what that vessel has done, and if they suspect illegal activity, they can take action against the vessel. It could be as simple as just not letting the vessel in, which sounds like an easy option, but actually for a port that's got a challenge of resource, actually turning it away is a very good option. It costs the illegal fisher a lot of money to stay at sea with a full hold of fish, burning petrol, having to find another port. So it will change behaviour even just by keeping them out of the port. But they can also bring them in and impound them and take action through the international regulations that are in place to suggest and prove that they were fishing illegally and seek a fine, etc.
And I think, is it something in the order of 35 countries have signed up to that agreement at this point?
Yeah, it's moving quite rapidly. I think we're actually at 40 at the moment, right, including the European Union. Although the European Union has got 28 countries in it, it only counts as one ratification because of the way things work. So 40 countries plus the European Union.
Okay, well that sounds encouraging, and there's a push to get more to sign up.
Yeah, I mean, it's got to be more. I mean, by my reckoning, you probably need to double that number for it to be truly effective. But more importantly now, you've got to get the most important ports. So the Port State Measures Agreement applies to the third country flag. So if a vessel's coming into a country, it's those vessels from other countries that the Port State Measures applies to. So what we want to try and do is bring the most important ports on board of the Port State Measures, those that land the most fish, because that's going to have the biggest impact on changing the behaviour of those vessels arriving.
Thank you. Tony, I was wondering if you could describe one project or one area, or it can be a number if you would like, where you feel already things are getting onto a better track as a result of your actions and the actions of others. I'm interested in describing success stories which give a kind of blueprint to how we might do this globally. Anywhere that springs to mind?
Yeah, there's quite a few things. I mean, we've been working under my direction, we've been working on this for around 4 years now, just coming up to 5 years actually. And the idea is we're building little foundation stones that can then grow into something far more solid. So the Port State Measures we've already discussed, I think it's vital because it's cost-effective way. Every fish that's caught has to come through a port. So by focusing on the Port State Measures, that is a real Achilles heel to illegal fishing because they've got to come to port. So the fact that came into force, as you highlighted, the first international agreement to do that's got to be one big tick in the box as regards success. But we're also working with Interpol to draw together their network. There's 190 countries, member states of Interpol, and they're able to share information, confidential information, very quickly over secure networks. And I would class the project scale that's been launched within Interpol as a success because they're able to share information about the worst illegal fishers. Again, I lose count because it's moving very quickly now, but I think we're around 20 what we call purple notices. They're basically wanted notices for illegal fishing vessels and owners. There was a fairly high-profile case recently of the Thunder, which was chased across the Southern Ocean by a sea shepherd. The vessel was looking for a port to hide in, but Interpol kept ahead of the game, preparing the different ports in case this vessel decided to try and come to port. And eventually the vessel gave up, scuttled itself off of the Sao Tome and Principe. And that island then took action against the vessel for scuttling. I mean, they didn't actually get fined in the end for illegal fishing. They got fined for maritime pollution because they scuttled the vessel without proper care and attention. But the fact was, this vessel's been fishing illegally for 10 years. It's changed its name, it's changed its call sign, it's changed the flag. The people that sort of effectively are supposed to monitor what that vessel's doing. And it's taken this long to chase it down. It was thanks to the Interpol's purple notice that people are aware of this vessel. So I would say that was a pretty significant move. And really it's about trying to bring several things to bear at the same time. So I was surprised to know that fishing vessels aren't mandated to identify themselves uniquely in the same way as a merchant vessel is. So if you see any merchant vessel, they've got a number on the back of their vessel, then if you investigate that number, it tells you precisely what that vessel is, where it was built, what it's doing, who owns it. That doesn't exist for fishing vessels. We don't actually know how many fishing vessels there are. So we've been working to uniquely identify fishing vessels. The regional fisheries management organisations, these large organisations that look after the species in the ocean, they've started to mandate now the use of these UVIs, what we call an IMO number, an International Maritime Number. And that's starting to make a difference because now we can account for vessels. So if a vessel is uniquely identified, you can tell that it is the vessel you think it is. It's not another vessel that's been renamed. If you were to look on the internet at the minute, there's a really interesting case about the Greco, which was caught just off of Africa in Somalian waters fishing illegally. Well, it's looking highly likely that this vessel is not actually the Greco, it's another vessel that was claimed to have sunk, that they've just renamed, having claimed the insurance for sinking it, but it's clearly not sunk. So these sort of things, they're small but important successes.
Yes, and they send a signal, don't they, through countries and communities and the like. I wanted to ask you what the character of the illegal fishermen is. I mean, are these highly impoverished, vulnerable people? Are they gangs and syndicates? Are they linked to other forms of organised crime? It'd be interesting to sort of know more about who's doing this.
Yeah, well, it's easy to get excitable about illegal fishing and assume it's all really, really terrible people. I mean, there's a sliding scale. I mean, it's just very patchy in the monitoring and control of illegal of fishing, and therefore fishing.
Sorry, Tony, I've lost you there for a moment.
Who's doing it?
Yes, you were saying who's doing it, and what the characters of the fishermen are like.
Yeah. So if you want to consider who's doing illegal fishing, I mean, I think it's a sliding scale.
Yeah.
There's obviously plenty of very honourable fishermen out there that are sticking by the rules, but because of the sheer amount of fish being taken out of the water, there are a few very bad actors. So if you look at the list of illegal vessels in the world, it varies, but it's around there's probably about 100 vessels listed as illegal vessels. But we know that that's not correct because there's vessels that are caught fishing illegally then settle effectively out of court, for want of a better way of describing it. So we don't really know the scale. What we do know is that the very worst actors will be involved in drug smuggling, arms smuggling, people smuggling, human rights abuses, effectively bonded labour. And we've seen examples of that written up in the press recently. The Guardian did a great expose on the Thai fishing industry and the fact that there was bonded labour there. And as a result, the Thais are now working hard to try and change that. The United Nations International Labour Organisation, they put plenty of reports out on the quality of life of fishermen who are literally setting fire to the vessel in the hope that the search and rescue units would come and take them off.
Really?
Or choosing to swim ashore. So we know the conditions can be very bad on the worst vessels.
Yeah.
At the same time, there's plenty of very, very good actors. So, yeah it varies. But the worst ones are the ones that we're really targeting at the moment. We're trying to sort of make sure that the worst actors are put clearly offside and that the people putting the best practices in place are rewarded through a more diligent supply chain, quicker access to ports, etc.
Thank you. So to sort of tackle the issue in the round, therefore, what would be required to effectively put the world's fisheries onto a more sustainable footing? And also then could we begin to explore how this work on illegal fishing relates to Pew's push on marine protected areas and on the sort of bigger picture? Could we untie those links a bit more?
Yeah, it's an extremely complex set of things that have to be considered, and they do interact, and there's more than the pure science involved of deciding how to fix these things. So there's certain areas that we are not working on. So subsidies is a significant factor in the amount of fish that's being taken out of the sea, but we're not working on subsidies. We've decided to come from a slightly different angle. But if you're going to pay a vessel fuel, for example, that allows it to go further and further afield with no cost to the owner, then it's going to cause an impact on how much fish is brought out of the ocean. So I think subsidies is something that people need to keep in mind. Where scientific data isn't taken into account. So if you come up with a quota that someone can catch that's based on poor science, or ignores the science, then you're effectively taking more fish out of the sea than can be sustained. that's going to have an impact. So there's a constant argument about the size of quotas and how to really monitor what's coming out of the ocean. Again, I personally don't work on the quota issues, but there are people working on that to make sure that we keep on a science-based, sensible quota. What we're trying to do is effectively shine a light on what's happening. So it should be fairly transparent. I mean, if someone's behaving themselves, why wouldn't they want to let you know where they've been, what they've done, how they've done it?
Yeah.
It should be fairly open, but for some reason or other, the fishing industry is driven to a very proprietary approach. So a vessel comes into port, it's extremely difficult for the port inspectors to understand exactly what that vessel's done. So we're trying to shine a light on that. And I think this is key, because if we can understand what that vessel, where it's been, that it hasn't been in a maritime protected area, that it's fished in accordance with its licence in the right areas, that we know how much it's caught because it's monitored its log in an electronic fashion, that it's used the observers, whether it be human observers or video observers, it's all very transparent, then that can only drive good behaviour. So we're trying to sort of put these little building blocks in place such that a vessel can demonstrate clearly that it's behaved. Now those vessels that are behaving, therefore, can come into port, they land the fish, it's all very easy. Ones that say, sorry, I can't let you know where I've been because my tracking equipment wasn't working, then people should be asking questions. And we have to change that behaviour. I mean, look at the number of aircraft flying around the world. They're all flying around with the transponder on. People know where the aircraft are minute by minute. Why isn't that the same to fishing vessels? Why can't it be? If they're not fishing illegally, why would it be a problem? So, it is more complex than I suggest, but that's really the sort of basic theory behind what we're doing.
Thank you, Tony. That's incredibly clear. The Marine Protected Areas agenda, does this overlap with what you're doing on illegal fishing? I ask because Pew has been instrumental with others in really some quite significant victories, in a sense, over recent years on the Marine Protected Areas agenda right around the world. It's pretty inspiring. From the Chagos Islands to Papua New Guinea in the United States, Hawaii, Marianas, Pacific Remote Islands, Coral Sea, etc., Easter Island. Do the two issues overlap? Is there illegal fishing going on in these protected areas or in the seas adjoining them?
So the idea is if you place a marine park and designate, then the expectation is that it's therefore enforced. Otherwise, you come under threat of not really protecting anything. So the crossover that the Ending Illegal Fishing Project has with the campaigns that are working on marine reserves is to try and help them with the enforcement. So we've developed a concept called Project Eyes in the Seas. It's based on my military experience actually in bringing layers and layers of data together in one place and allowing you to understand exactly what you're looking at, or at least have a very good idea of what you're looking at. And if a vessel turns off its transponders and wants to hide, we can still find them using different techniques like radar from space or imagery from space that's pretty much the same as a camera would take. But you need to know where to look. So based on our understanding of the way the fishermen are operating, where they're operating, where the fish are, we can direct those assets to watch into a marine reserve to see if what we call a dark target turns up, because that's a vessel that's turned off its transponder. It doesn't want people to know where it is. Enters a marine reserve where it shouldn't be and fishes, and we can now evidence that. So there's an important overlap between the surveillance and monitoring work that we're doing and the ability to be able to designate and then protect these large swathes of water.
Very interesting. The key issue throughout seems to be governance, who governs the seas, and in a sense it's not a free-for-all out there, although it might be in parts of the seas, but nor is it the land where effectively human societies tend to focus their attention. But perhaps new technologies plus growing awareness is changing this, and we are more aware and we are more capable of enforcing governance on the high seas than ever before.
Yeah, it's immensely. The governance of all this is very complex. There's a lawyer called Michael Lodge who shows a great diagram of just how difficult this is. It's like a snake's wedding. There's lines everywhere about who's responsible for what and how.
Yeah.
And I mean, ultimately, it seems that no one's really ultimately responsible. So if you look at the high seas, every state that operates there is responsible for protecting the high seas, but of course there's no one really taking charge. And even if you do take charge, there's no real way of bringing a penalty to bear. So my view is that while we could seek some kind of international leadership that will take action, perhaps at the United Nations, about the way people are interpreting the International Convention for the Law of the Sea, there isn't any teeth behind doing something. So if you fish illegally on the high seas, it's like what ultimately happens. It's very difficult. So what you've actually got to do is you've got to turn it on its head a little bit and drive for moral practices. So if, let's say, a retailer wants to buy fish and it doesn't want to sell fish that have been caught without some kind of moral basis to its customers, and there's many customers now that don't want to see unsustainable fish caught or fish that have got slavery in the supply chain.
Yes.
Actually, instead of using the more international model for punishment, you actually use the retailers, and they'll refuse to take the fish that can't be evidenced as being caught properly.
Yes.
So you have to turn it on its head a little bit. Whether I see a time in the future where there's some kind of single body that's responsible for all this, I don't think there is.
No.
What we should have is a very clear set of regulations that ought to be applied, and people that aren't applying them should be avoided. Yeah. And we are seeing that pattern occurring, that people realise now that they can ask the right questions, expecting an appropriate answer, and therefore hopefully that is what will change the way people are dealing with illegal fishing.
Yes. And in the West, certainly in the UK, there seems to be a relatively high level of awareness around sustainable fish and the MSC certification and others. Is that the case? And also, what about big global markets for fish? Are consumers becoming more aware in China and India and elsewhere, where huge volumes are being, Japan, where huge volumes are being consumed?
Yeah, well, so again, every area of the world is different. So the way the British deal with fish is very different to the way the French deal with fish, which is even more different to the way the Indians might and Japanese. Every culture is very different. So you can't really do a sort of one answer fits all. So what do I know? I don't know the real answer to what you're asking, but what we are seeing is changes. So if you look at shark fin alone, this is a problem. Up until recently in China, shark fin featured on wedding banquets and large government dinners. And if my understanding is correct, then there's now a step change that's not happening.
Yes.
So it's like a generational thing, whether more informed youngsters are realising that actually this is having a huge impact. So things are changing that way. One of the concepts I kind of like to repeat is that if we look after the oceans, then effectively the fish look after themselves. I mean, there's the golden egg of protein. It's the protein that keeps giving.
Yes.
If we take it to the point where there's no longer sustainable and stocks are collapsing, ultimately we lose this. And you can't replace it on land. You can't have enough cows in the world to eat protein without having the grain and all the other effects that by having animals on land you have by trying to put people and animals in the same place. It's just not really a sustainable answer. So we have to look after the ocean just for that. But of course, if the ocean does continue to decline, which all the science is saying now, we're going to have bigger problems. It provides half the oxygen that we breathe is thanks to the ocean.
Yeah.
So I think people are now very aware that this is a real problem.
Yes.
And those that are in a position to make choices are starting to make choices. There's plenty of people in the world that survival is their first instinct, and they need protein.
Yeah.
It's a balance. We have to have it should be that we can protect this resource for the good of all. It shouldn't be that someone gets penalised because they actually need the fish.
No.
They're not allowed to get it because we're trying to protect it. There has to be a more balanced approach.
That seems very fair, and I think it's in the order of 2 billion people potentially depend on fish for their sort of daily lives in some form. I've seen varying figures of that kind, whether it's from being fishermen or through simply eating fish. It's a huge number of people.
It's certainly a huge number. I think it's even higher than that.
Yes, it probably is. Yeah.
Yeah.
I wanted to ask a few sort of personal questions, if I may, before coming back to the substance. And one is, you spent, I think, 27 years or so in the Navy, as you mentioned at the beginning. And I wondered whether, you've probably seen more of the high seas than most of us combined, as you've been around the world. Have you? And have they declined in your lifetime visibly? Have you had close encounters with whales and fish stocks and fishermen?
Yeah, so yeah, I did 27 years, and a lot of that was at sea. I think I've touched every ocean in the world. We got into the Arctic, got into the Antarctic, Pacific, Atlantic, North and South, Indian Ocean. I think that's them all.
Maybe.
Yeah, we have, and I do remember many years ago we used to basically act as scientific officers. You would log on the bridge of the ship what you see. You would log seabirds, you would log whales, and anything you saw you would capture, and it would go back to the science. I think by the end of the career, we were certainly not using those logs as much as we used to. But then again, I think maybe where we're operating have changed as well. So it's very different in the Persian Gulf than it is in the Indian Ocean. But I do remember the things that used to fascinate me, like flying fish. You could watch them all the time, and there's a little bit of a swell running. These fish would come out of the water and glide for hundreds of yards before they back into the water, and if it was very rough, your bow would drop into the ocean, and the fish would be going over the top of the bow, and then it'd come back up again. The odd one wouldn't be so lucky; he'd be caught on the deck for a while until it went back underwater and then be gone again. I mean, these things are fascinating. I used to fly, so we'd be out in the helicopter, and you'd see different things in the helicopter because the sound, the beating of the rotor blades had an impact on the ocean, and you would attract sharks. So if you were in an area where there was sharks, you'd suddenly find yourself hovering with half a dozen sharks underneath you, and you think to yourself, this is not the time I want the engine to fail. We used to see a lot of sort of minke whales and the pilot whales. I never saw anything tremendously amazing in the sense of orcas coming out of the sea. Dolphins in the bow wave of the vessel, that was pretty standard. And at night, the bioluminescence, your wake would shine green, which was again fascinating. Yeah, I think I've got an affinity with it. My only regret is I didn't know more. I didn't take it for granted per se, but I didn't know enough about the ocean. I wish I'd known more about it when I was actually out there. A bit more of a sort of live ocean advocate, but the role I've taken on now is quite exciting, and sort of looking back, quite pleased to be able to sort of carry on my connection with the ocean.
Yes, it's wonderful, and you speak with authority as a result. And perhaps you could play a role in the navies of the world from here on in, being more active stewards in a sense of the marine environment.
Yeah, I think the navies of the world are active stewards.
Yes.
It's just that they don't always know where to put the information, and that's one of the things we worked on to try and feed back certainly to the Royal Navy, but with the US Navy as well, and the Coast Guard in particular. But the European Navy, the case I mentioned earlier, the Greco,
yes,
actually it was the European naval force that helped locate that vessel. So there's plenty of indication that the navies want to help. They don't always understand how they can. And then, of course, the other side of it is the security. So if you look at the Pacific, and there's effectively potential for resource wars over protecting fishing rights.
Really.
So that's the downside of the military, in the sense of effectively they need to protect the resources, and you could see conflict quite easily over protecting the fisheries rights. And obviously, back in the days of the Cod War, that was effectively it was the same thing. It was fishing a decision that who owned the rights to the cod Well, it's happening again in the spratlys around China, and North and South Korea often have little spats. There is a need to make sure that this is all cleared up,
policed, better governed, and as you say, managed in such a way that the fish replenish, the stocks replenish, and everybody can sort of cultivate this resource over time.
Yeah.
Very, very interesting. And there's also, of course, the issue of acidification and marine plastic waste, these dreadful islands of marine plastic, which are such a sort of menace, really, and seemingly intractable problem, although there are efforts to address marine plastic on the terrestrial surface, as it were, rather than the clean-up, although there's a Dutch man who's trying to do a clean-up as well. And then over and above it all, the acidifying ocean as a result of climate change, which sort of further compounds the problem. And that can only be addressed ultimately through a major effort at reducing global greenhouse gas emissions. But in a sense, irrespective of the changing climate and irrespective of marine plastic, if the world could get a handle on illegal fishing, this would make a very significant contribution to bringing about a better sea, a more sustainable sea.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, the figures I mentioned there. I mean, it comes down to 1 in 5 fish effectively is linked to illegal fishing. That's a huge figure. And if they're fishing illegally, using illegal practices, damaging gear, drift nets that are with a bycatch, they're not set in lines at the right depth. So sharks, seabirds, turtles. There has to be a clear responsibility for those people that want to fish this resource to only take what they need. And the sort of consumerist approach that we have of, for some reason, wanting to use the bladder of a highly at-risk species such as the Piquita. Why do we need to basically wipe out a species in order that we can just get something else that we desire that has basically no medicinal benefits at all? These sort of things drive me crazy. It's a microeconomic thing where people put their purse before their mind. It's sad. It's very sad.
It is
but
very
I think
sad,
we can make a difference. And you mentioned plastics. Within the UK, certainly this has now really hit a high level. The fact that it is now news, it's in the news. And I think people are starting to make choices like using, not using plastic cups that are just one use and then throw, carrying their own replaceable cups, and it's becoming a fashion item. And I think that will make a change,
Yes.
When you go to the supermarket to buy 4 apples and they're wrapped up in plastic on styrofoam inside the next layer of plastic to keep them together, it's completely unnecessary.
You're entirely right, yes. So conscious consumerism and consumer activity is a very significant part of all of this.
So.
I recently became a vegetarian, including avoiding fish, which I, in many senses greatly miss. And my wife continues to eat fish, and my forthcoming son, who arrives in the world in a couple of months' time, I anticipate will eat fish and meat. But is vegetarianism one way of addressing the crisis facing the seas, or is it more a question of simply eating fish well, and ones which have been caught well and sustainably?
Yeah, well, my personal opinion is that you don't need to avoid fish to save the oceans. But you do need to make the right choices. So that there are not many very clear ways of knowing exactly what you're eating. But the first thing is you've got to start asking the question. So if the restaurants and supermarkets understand that the consumer wants to know more information, and that will start to be forthcoming. So you can see attempts at that. Pole and line caught tuna. There's literally one tuna at a time caught on a fishing rod. That's highly clear how that fish is caught and that it's sustainable. And a lot of good work going on for pole and line caught tuna. But there's confusion because if you just see line caught on the tin, that is not clear to anyone what that is, and that's probably long line caught, which is 40 miles of wire with giant hooks hanging off of it, set at a depth that will see bycatch. May not be the most responsible way of fishing. Done properly, it can be, but it's not clear to the consumer the difference between pole and line and line unless you're educated behind it. And then those are the tins that don't have anything on it, the Hussein gears, where they effectively wrap a huge net around a stock of fish and draw it up. Everything comes up at the same time, whatever's in there. Now, they're driven to act responsible. They're not supposed to capture. They're not supposed to haul these nets in if there's, shark or bycatch and things in there. But of course, who really knows?
Yeah.
So it's very difficult. Fish aggregating devices, FADs as they're called. These are just floats in the water. They can be made out of all sorts of things, but fish are attracted to shadows in the water. So if you're in a harbour and you're on a floating pontoon, you'll always see fish just below the pontoon. Well, that's effectively a fish aggregating device. And people will put these devices in the water, allow them to soak and float for a few hours. The fish aggregate underneath, and then they just put the net around the whole lot.
Yeah. And
that takes the mature fish, the immature fish. You're taking the whole swathe of the community away. So I think trying to make the right choice and being clear about the choices and avoiding those fish that are at risk, not driving things like Patagonian toothfish, the Chilean sea bass in the American market. It commands a huge price, but the operators now, there's actually a coalition of legal toothfish operators are determined to show that you can catch this fish legally and sustainably, and therefore fill a market. But there's plenty of other people that know that this fish is worth a lot of money, and then they'll go and fish. And the thunder case I talked about earlier was one of those examples. So it's extremely difficult to understand exactly where it's coming from, but it is a viable industry and it should be allowed to go on. It just needs to be done sustainably. So I would argue you don't have to not eat fish. You just have to be very careful about which fish you're eating.
I'm sure you're right. And does it fall therefore ultimately to nation states and people within those countries to campaign for better approaches to fishery management at the level of countries, or is it at the level of international governance, or both? Or just trying to understand how we can really crack this.
Well, so I think it's down to the nation state. This is a leadership thing. So for a while we used to say there's no silver bullet here. We need a lot of different things to come together. But I'm more convinced than ever that there is a silver bullet. The silver bullet is leadership, and it's those people that are supposed to take responsibility for their country and their resources took responsibility for them, then that would make a huge difference. And we're seeing real leadership changes and high level advocacy. As you say, the unit you work with is obviously doing a grand job of bringing people's attention to it.
That's very kind.
The US, and then small island developing states like Palau, making big decisions about how they protect their waters and things. It's moving in that direction. I think the consumer is an important factor because they can ask the right things, but that's only going to be in those countries where we're in a position that the consumer can change things, and you need a certain you need to be of a certain wealth to be able to make those decisions. So I think Britain can lead, Europe can probably lead, but once you start to get into countries where the daily cost of living is driven to how you choose your food, then that's going to change things. It's got to be down to international leadership because the ocean is everybody's concern. And we can't just wait for the public will to be the vast majority. It's the leaders that have got to do the changes. So I think we should be aiming at the governments of the world to make the choices and the retailers to respond to make sure that they protect the resource for the future.
Thank you, Tony. Well, it's a very powerful vision, and thank you very much for sharing it with me. I very much want to write about this issue in my book, so I will pick up on a number of the case studies you've given of best practice, and very much hope to continue to work with you on this issue and indeed on all the others with Pew. Thank you.
Excellent. I know, well, good luck with the book. I'm sure it'll be